Останній перепис населення в Україні був у 2001 році. Ті дані давно застарілі.
The last census in Ukraine was in 2001. These data are already too old, and we are still based on it when we make the most important decisions. Foreign register-based census in Ukraine is the possibility to find out whether Ukraine is ready to conduct census on the basis of the administrative data, what is needed for that, and the experience of other countries on that. And it's also the development of the roadmap to prepare Ukraine to the census in the round of censuses in 2021. So please join to our webinar, Register-Based Census Concepts, where you will find out how to prepare the country for the transition to the register-based census, how to transform administrative data into statistics. The forum will last for 5 weeks and will unite 5 online sessions. Ukrainian and international experts will take part in it, the employees of the UNFPA, the statistical agencies of Ukraine that have been implementing the digital transformation, state authorities, state statisticians responsible for the census in Ukraine.
Доброго ранку, шановні пані та
панове. Good morning, dear participants. 10 a.m., so we'll start our work. So first of all, I would like to make an announcement from the administration of the Zoom platform. Alexander, the floor is yours. Thank you, Oleg. I would like to take several minutes of your attention, dear participants. In fact, the Zoom platform is, you are probably all familiar with the Zoom platform, but Zoom webinar is different from what we have seen before. So let me remind you several rules.
In Ukrainian and after that in English, and I will just show you how to work here in platform Zoom. First of all, you need to use the button. It's called interpretation. At the bottom of the screen, you can find it. And after that, please choose the English language. That's all what you need to know for the continue. Шановні учасники, для початку, будь ласка, перемкніться на українську мову перекладу. У нас сьогодні доступний переклад. Ви можете вибрати її через кнопочку «Перевод» або «Interpretation», в залежності від того, що ви використовуєте, і далі вже вибрати саме українську мову. Ну, а якщо повернутися до стандартної панелі керування Zoom, то у вас є декілька кнопок внизу. Перша з них ліворуч – це налаштування звуку. Тут ви можете якраз таки керувати своїм звуком. Вона трішки змінюється далі по порядку. Зараз до цього повернемося. Наступна кнопка чат. Будь ласка, використовуйте її максимально активно, пишіть ваші коментарі, запитання і все, що стосується нашої сьогоднішньої зустрічі. Також дуже важлива кнопка – це підняти руку. Якщо ви її натиснете, то в списку учасників модератор буде бачити, що ви хотіли би або взяти слово, або прокоментувати якусь доповідь, наприклад, одного з доповідачів. Таким чином ви зможете привернути до себе увагу. Будь ласка, також можете її використовувати. В той момент, коли ви піднімете руку, якраз таки у модератора з'явиться можливість надати вам слово, і кнопочка налаштування звуку зміниться у вас на стандартну кнопку Zoom з включенням-виключенням мікрофону. Ну і ще одна червона кнопка «Залишити вебінар». Сподіваюсь, ви її використаєте лише в кінці. А найголовніше, що нас цікавить, це саме переклад. Натиснувши її, у вас з'являється невеличке додаткове меню. Воно досить просте, складається з 4 пунктів. Перший з них – це вимкнення перекладу. Якщо він вам не потрібен і ви хочете чути, так би мовити, пряму мову, просто вимкніть і слухайте її. Далі йдуть в списку англійська та українська, відповідно, ви обираєте ту, яку вам потрібно. І останній 4-й пункт – це вимкнення оригінального звуку або його ввімкнення. Zoom паралельно з перекладом також дає можливість слухати оригінальний звук досить тихо. Тут, будь ласка, можете його вимкнути. Єдине прохання до всіх спікерів та тих, хто буде говорити, зверніть, будь ласка, увагу, що мова, яка встановлена у вас в перекладі, має відповідати тій, на якій ви говорите. Це дуже важливо, тому що якщо, наприклад, ви оберете англійську, а почнете говорити українською, Zoom не зрозуміє, хто є перекладачем, а хто активним спікером. І тому, на жаль, якість звуку буде досить низькою. Тому, будь ласка, одразу дуже важливо встановити собі ту мову, яка є для вас робочою. На цьому все. Бажаю всім гарного дня.
Дякую, Олександре.
Thank you, Alexander. Greetings to all those who have just joined, and thank you for your attention to our event. I hope that right now you have already adjusted all your audio channels, you have your hot coffee with you, and you're ready for work. So my name is Oleg Voronenko. I am the Population Development Specialist of the Ukrainian Office for UNFPA. I'm really happy to greet all of the participants of the forum that was organized by the State Statistics Service of Ukraine and UNFPA on the media protection of our partners from Vox Ukraine and technical support of Arena CS. Our online forum that will take place every Wednesday of the November and will finish on the 7th of December. It's the platform for discussion and search for the answer to questions in which way can Ukraine change the methodology for census and start using administrative data for population statistics. Of course, aiming at the midterm perspective, the round of census in 2030 that will start in 2025 and will be completed in 2034. We have invited best world specialists, the representatives of the UNECE, Eurostat, national services, bureaus of statistics, scientists, practitioners to share the news in the area of census on the basis of administrative data, to present new sources of data that can be used for population census, and to introduce the experience of a number of European countries on the transition from the traditional methods to the new ones. Also, we have invited our Ukrainian colleagues to present the current situation in our country and to share the vision of the further perspective within the context of our general topic of the forum. The audience of the forum are representatives of the executive authorities, operators of administrative registers, the regional and state also representatives of public organizations, analytical centers, and international organizations. The program of the forum is available online in 2 languages, and I hope that references for all the documents you have via the email. So our forum is also broadcasted on the Facebook pages, and we make the records, and then the video will be placed for will be in open access of the organizers on YouTube. But that's not all. We will create the online depository of official materials and sources that can be useful for the development of the further project for transition to register-based census. Of course, online format limits the possibility of free discussion. That's when the organizers decided to change the form of it in the way of written messaging. And you can see that we have almost 150 participants right now, and other participants are watching the Facebook broadcasting. That's why we encourage you to ask questions to our speakers in the window of chat on the Zoom platform and also on pages on Facebook. We will be monitoring all the questions, and we will read them at the end of each webinar in the way that they were obtained. If some of the questions will not be answered because of lack of time, we will try to give the answers later. I would like to mention that in the framework of this forum, we do not have the possibility to discuss political issues or questions that do not refer the register-based census, and I'm thanking you for your understanding. That's all from me. Now I would like to give floor to the organizers of the forum, Igor Wagner, head of the Statistics Service of Ukraine. So the floor is yours, Igor Evgenovich. I beg your pardon. So I sometimes forget to turn the microphone. So thank you, my dear colleagues. First of all, I would like to welcome you all and thank you. And I would like to greet you with having such a big event today in Ukraine. More than a year ago, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, set a task to find the possibility to do census by using national electronic informational resources. Our today's event is the cycle of webinars which will end up in a conference, which are vitally important for Ukraine because they will allow us to clearly understand which way, which path Ukraine is to take from the traditional census to register-based census. For us, it's a very important matter, you know, and not to invent the bicycle again. We are to borrow the best practices to understand the possible risks on this way in order to overcome them successfully. I would also like to thank all those honorable participants and speakers who have joined this conference, who have expressed their wish to share their experience. And I also have to say words of gratitude to our dear colleagues from the international organizations, all of those who have joined and who are always supportive and helping the Statistics Service of Ukraine, and not only on population issues, but also in any other questions. I can't help thanking the Mr. Ambassador, the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, Janus de Mol. And I would like to say most of all to the person who made it all happen, and that is Jaime Nadal, who is the representative in Ukraine. Thanks to his persistence and active participation, this event is possible. But I would like to stop right now and say that the aim of this webinar is not just to go through the advantages among the traditional census and register-based census. They are obvious. They are clear to everyone. But the aim of the cycle of these webinars and the final online conference is the understanding of the roadmap, what it should be like. So I encourage all the experts to join this final conference and to join to the working group that we plan to establish in order to have the methodological project that will enable us to create the roadmap for Ukraine. How do we move from the traditional census to the register-based census? So that's all from me, and I want to give more time to our honorable speakers. So one more time, thank you all, and I hope all of us, 140 something participants, that you will all receive big number of useful and interesting information that will enable us to understand how we should move. to study the experience of our colleagues and understand how much time we need and resources to do the register-based census. Thank you, dear Oleg. Thank you, Igor Yevgenyevich. And I would like to thank the State Statistics Service of Ukraine for a wonderful cooperation in the organization of this online forum. And now I would like to give floor to Jaime Nadal, the representative in Ukraine. The floor is yours, dear Jaime Nadal.
Thank you, Oleg, Mr. Igor Werner, Chair of Ukraine Stats, Ambassador Jens de Mol, Ambassador of the Netherlands, dear participants, good morning, Dobrogo Ranku. I'm very pleased to welcome you on behalf of UNFPA at this international forum dedicated to exploring the ways for Ukraine to upgrade its population statistics. And I'd like to start by thanking all the experts from the statistical officers from Estonia, Finland, Netherlands, Poland, Slovenia, Spain, and the UK, our partners from Eurostat, from the University of Southampton, from DevStats, from Kyivstar, our colleagues from UNECE, the Economic Commission for Europe, and the several hundred Ukrainian experts and participants from all over the country who will be contributing to the forum. But why this forum? Why this focus on censuses? First, because when we think about public policies and when we think particularly about inclusive, effective, and equitable policies and programs, as well as political representation, we need accurate data. There is simply no other way to uphold and promote development, prosperity, and human rights than knowing the facts and the trends that, about the issues that affect the people that we serve. Second, because the private sector can only thrive if it counts on a good understanding of market demographics so they can guide effective investments and business developments. Businesses depend on census data to make strategic and operational decisions as they plan what to make, how to make it for, where to market it, where to sell it, and how to adapt to the country changing demographics. And thirdly, but not last, because citizens need data so they can effectively interact with the government around objective facts and trends, because they need to take part in policy design, monitor the implementation of those policies, assess their results, and pursue the accountability of those involved. Altogether, fundamental pillars of democratic governance. A population census is probably the unique way to get such information and see those trends. Facts and trends that bear important implications for how policies concerning human development, environment, health, education, housing, social security, energy, food and water security, migration, conflicts and peace building, just to name some of the most important ones, are designed and are implemented. And just as an example, population data is required to produce values for 98 out of the 231 SDG indicators. During the 2010 round of censuses, UNFPA provided support to 135 countries at all stages and in all processes related to census operations, from project planning and development to procurement of equipment and services to census data dissemination and use. For the current round of censuses, the 2020, we are focusing on the modernization of censuses, including the use of new and emerging technologies and methodologies, the use of georeference population data, and as well, making the censuses easier to access, understand, and use by everyone. The combined use of new methodological approaches and ICT has resulted in a quantum leap regarding the accuracy, validity, and reliability of administrative records, which in turn can serve the basis for a census. This new generation of censuses based on administrative registers bring many advantages. And Mr. Igor Werner already anticipated, they lower the operation cost, they improve the quality of information, and they also increase the frequency of data collection and disclosure. But on the other hand, it requires that countries develop robust, universal, and well-integrated admin record systems in order to achieve a wide coverage of the most relevant socio-demographic information, as well as the compatibility of these records with information that would be collected normally via censuses. In this context, UNFPA and Ukraine Stats are proposing to start a discussion on the use of administrative records for census taking, having as references the successful international experiences on this subject, the new instruments and tools for data collection, and the current status of Ukraine with regard to its own administrative records. We truly hope that this forum will provide ideas and solutions. Again, this is not about assessing whether it could be better or not to go in this direction. We know it's better, but we need to know how to do it, how to go about it. So we hope that we will come up with those ideas and those solutions to be used in the coming months to draw a roadmap for Ukraine. A path that will take us hopefully together from relying on the traditional total enumeration methodology to a wider, if not exclusive, use of administrative registers and auxiliary data sources, like for instance, satellite imagery or big data, to produce accurate and reliable population statistics. With all the limitations of the word format, I'd like to call on you to be as proactive and interactive as possible and make full use of the participation of the world-class experts that will be taking place in the forum. I wish you a very interesting and fruitful work. Thank you very much. Дякую вам. Thanks.
Дякую, пане Надаль.
Thank you, Mr. Nadal. As you know, and many countries decided to share their experience with us, and among them are the Netherlands, which were one of the countries from all over the world who reduced from the traditional census by just surveys of the households. And as if I'm not wrong, the first one happened in the Netherlands back in 1981. So we have invited the plenipotentiary and extraordinary Mr. Ambassador of the Netherlands, Janus de Mol. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Добрий день всім. Я дуже радий
So greetings to all of you. I'm very happy to greet you.
Well, first of all, my respect to the Ukrainian State Service for Statistics for organizing this. I would like to congratulate the UN Population Fund on their 75th anniversary, and I'm extremely happy to be able to share some views with you. Actually, the census is a Latin word, and I'm a classicist, so I immediately think of the Romans who actually conducted the censuses every 5 years. Calling upon every man and his family to return to his place of birth to be counted in order to keep track of the population. And the census actually played a crucial role in the administration of the peoples of an expanding Roman Empire. And it was used to determine taxes and the military service. Well, for an average person like me, census might be like a rather unremarkable exercise that needs to be performed with a certain frequency in every given country. In practice, however, it has proven to be quite a powerful tool and a unique source of socio-demographic data. And it can provide the most detailed information on various characteristics of the population, both at the national and regional levels. And it can help to place it in an international context. When analyzed and used accurately, this information can be of great importance for forecasting and management of the country's socio-economic development. And it can empower the government with the knowledge that is crucial for planning and implementation of the budget processes, the implementation of a balanced socio-demographic policy, regulation of migration processes inside and outside the country, and much more. And to be honest, all that I've said so far makes sense and seems quite straightforward. As we know, Ukraine is actually currently preparing for an innovative variant of the traditional census of 2020. And at the same time, it is undergoing the process of transformation that eventually should lead to a fully fledged registry-based census of the 2030 round. And in this context, we, and I'm a representative of the Netherlands as a country that for many years already has been supportive of Ukraine in reaching its various ambitions, we try to assist our Ukrainian counterparts in this initiative as well. By doing so, we not only help Ukraine to come one step closer to the implementation of European norms and principles of good governance, but we also demonstrate our firm trust in its rich potential and the potential of its talented people. We truly believe in the future of Ukraine. After all, whatever we do, it is about and for the people. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a very productive discussion today. Stay healthy, take care, and once again, I would like to congratulate Ukrstad with this very good initiative. And last but not least, a special word of appreciation to Jaime Nadal for the excellent cooperation. All the best.
Дуже дякую, пане посол.
Thanks a lot, Your Excellency. Now we are well motivated and we are ready to transfer to the technical part of the webinar. I would like to give the floor to Ms. Fiola Willis-Nunez, our colleague from Geneva, from the European Economic Commission of the United Nations. Ms. Willis-Nunez is heading the program on census of population and housing, and she also is responsible for public communications of the Statistics Fund of the UNECE. Today, she will talk about the methodology on organization of census based on administrative data. Please, Ms. Fiona, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak at this meeting. May I just check before I begin that you can see my screen? Can you confirm if you see my slides? Excellent.
Так, все гаразд, бачимо, можна починати.
Yes, it's good. We can see the slides. We can start.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I would add to all the previous speakers, thank you very much to Statistics Ukraine and to UNFPA for organizing this event. And congratulations, I see that there are already more than 170 participants taking part in the event. So that's very impressive and definitely demonstrates a great degree of commitment in your country. So that definitely bodes extremely well. My name is Fiona Willis-Nunez. I'm from UNECE, that's the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. For those of you not familiar with this part of the UN, it's the regional economic commission representing all the countries of Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia, and also North America. So we have a very wide remit of 56 member countries. And as Oleg said, I'm specifically in charge of our work on promoting international cooperation in censuses. So I've been asked to speak to you about methodological approaches to register-based censuses in the UNECE region. I've taken the liberty of actually removing the word methodological from the title of my presentation because the colleagues that follow me, my dear colleagues, Eric, Diana, and Janusz, are going to talk in a lot more detail about the technical aspects. But what I would like to do for this first presentation is just rewind a little and give you a very basic overview of what we mean by a register-based census and how they work in our region. So I'm going to start off just by sort of making sure that we're all on a level playing field in what we understand by a register-based census and what it looks like within the UNECE region. I'm going to talk a little bit about the guidance and frameworks that are offered by UNECE to ensure that all the countries in the region are aiming for the same thing and have the same goals in mind. And I'll give you some ideas of the basic features and methods and the requirements for those methods to be applied. And I'm going to end with letting you know about some of the challenges. As Jaime said in his introductory speech, we are all well aware of the many opportunities presented by moving to a register-based census. So my job here is not to try and convince you, because you are already convinced. So my job instead is to make sure that everybody is aware that there are many challenges to be overcome at the same time. And again, just to touch again on something which Jaime mentioned earlier, I would like to ensure that I really stress the link of the Sustainable Development Goals to the need for a census. Why do we still need a census even now in the day and age of many, many different data sources? Well, the Sustainable Development Goals, to which all the members of the United Nations have signed up, include a huge number of targets and indicators. Among them, I've highlighted two that are of particular relevance here to censuses. Indicator number 17.18.1 refers to the proportion of sustainable development indicators produced at the national level with full disaggregation when relevant to the target in accordance with the fundamental principles of official statistics. Now, it's that full disaggregation which I really want to stress. There are many, many other ways to produce statistics, but only a census is capable of producing things to such a level of detail that we can have this full disaggregation. That means by small areas, by rural and urban, male and female, age groups, ethnicity, migratory status, and so on. And then indicator 17.19.2a, I know that's rather a mouthful, but that's how the United Nations works. The proportion of countries that have conducted at least one population and housing census in the last 10 years. So this illustrates that even within the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, the importance of conducting a census is so great that it has been included as an indicator in its own right. So with that in mind, I would like to really reiterate why I am here representing UNECE. There are global recommendations for population and housing censuses around the world. But recognizing that different regions have different specificities, each different regional commission of the UN Secretariat has its own particular set of guidelines and recommendations. I have here the hard copy of this document, and if anybody does want to refer to these, they are available online. I've put the link here in the slide. But if anyone would like a hard copy, I can certainly send them. You may feel free to request them from me and I can send them in the mail. They are available in English, Russian, and in French. And these guidelines go into great detail about the methodology, the technology, census operations from the planning stages right down to dissemination and communication. They cover, of course, both population and housing topics, and they divide up the topics into those which are considered core topics, that is, those which are recommended as fundamental, crucial to all censuses, and non-core topics, which are those that are at the discretion of a particular country, depending on your specific policy needs and circumstances. The recommendations also include a section on quality management, which is ongoing, runs right from the beginning all the way through to the dissemination and communication aspect of running a census. And I've just highlighted one sentence here from these recommendations, which is data should be collected using the most viable and cost-effective means. And of course, I think it's clear from the topic of this set of seminars in Ukraine that the most viable and cost-effective means can evolve with time, and that can change from traditional face-to-face or paper-based data collection methods to online methods, and then eventually to register-based methods based on administrative data. Again, rewinding back to some of the fundamentals of what a census is for, what we mean by it. Traditionally, there are 4 crucial defining features of a census as it has been understood over the years. The first of these is individual enumeration. That means we're not talking about measuring households as the basic unit of measurement, but individual people. Simultaneity, that means in the ideal scenario, a single snapshot in time. Of course, in practice, the actual conducting of a census doesn't necessarily happen on one day or at one instant, but it should always be with reference to a particular date so that people are neither counted twice nor missed out if they move around over time. The third defining feature is universality. That means that everybody within the territory of the country needs to be included. And traditionally, defined periodicity. That means that there should be a nice, neat time series that has typically in most countries been once every 10 years to ensure that the census is updated and the information is gathered at regular intervals. So we can understand that there are different methods of conducting a census. There is the traditional method, which our esteemed colleague from the Netherlands just mentioned has been ongoing for millennia, of gathering information face to face. Nowadays, the word traditional census can even include methods that are not so traditional, but still include direct collection of data. So an internet-based census where people are presented with the form and have to fill it out is still considered to be a traditional census. At the opposite end here, we have the register-based census, which means not collecting any information directly from individuals. But I have presented this diagram as a continuum because I want to stress that while there are traditional censuses at one end and register-based at the other end, in the middle are combined censuses, and it would be false to assume that these are 3 neat, discrete kinds of census with a hard line in between them. In practice, there is typically a movement, a gradual movement from one end of the spectrum to the other. And it could in fact be difficult to specify exactly where the line falls between a combined census and a register-based census. That is, if a country is using some information from registers and some information from surveys, then it will be considered a combined census. But the degree to which information is gathered from each of those sources can change over time. Now, this graph that I am showing here illustrates the evolution of these main kinds of censuses within the member countries of the UNECE region. So back in the census, the 2000 census round, 40 of our member countries reported that they used direct collection of data from respondents. So that is a traditional census. And at that time, there were only 3 which conducted a fully register-based census and 5 that were in between in a combined format. By 2010, the last round, the number of fully register-based countries had risen to 9. And in the current round, as we see here, 14 reporting or are doing a fully register-based census. Now, I should add to this that at this very point in time, we have a survey open among all the member countries to let us know about their current plans with the 2020 round, given that, as we know, for many, there have been impacts of the global pandemic and some have had to change the details of their plans. So hopefully by the end of next week, I should be able to update this graph. We don't envisage any enormous changes. I don't think anybody is actually planning to fully switch from one type of census to another. We so far have 20 responses from member countries, and among those, only 3 are reporting a fully traditional census, with 9 reporting fully register-based at the moment. And I have seen connected to the participants list of this current webinar, my dear colleague, Ian White. So just to make him blush a little, here is something that Ian said in our recent UNECE meeting on censuses back in September. He very boldly declared that there will be no countries in the next round that conduct a wholly traditional census. Of course, it remains to be seen whether or not that is true, but I think Ian has picked up on a very important trend away from the wholly traditional census and moving very much towards combined and eventually register-based censuses. So what exactly do we mean by a register-based census, and where do these come from? Well, they were developed in the Nordic countries in the 1970s. The first fully register-based census was conducted in Denmark in 1981. And as I said before, the main defining feature of a fully register-based census is that there is no direct collection of data from the population. So it is possible to have some supporting data from pre-existing surveys, but those are surveys that were already being conducted for other reasons. There is no deliberate going out to collect information for the purposes of the census. And the basic principle of the register-based census is that data that are held in administrative records are combined, and they're combined by matching something such as a personal identification number that is the same across different sources. And this approach permits the production of census data at a greatly reduced cost and with relatively limited human effort, once a good quality system of statistical registers has been established. This emphasis at the end, I have added to stress the importance of it, and I think it is something that will be returned to in detail in subsequent webinars in this series, the importance of a good quality system of statistical registers. Now, I've already waved one document at you. Now I have another, which is the UNECE Guidelines on the Use of Registers and Administrative Data for Population and Housing Censuses. This is a document that was produced back in 2018, available in English and Russian. And this is a more detailed guide to how register-based censuses can be conducted. Again, referring to my dear colleague, Ian White, he was the principal editor of this document. So he is probably far more intimately familiar with it than I am. So I'm delighted that he's also on this call today. And this document goes into the operational considerations, practical and technical, also legal. It's very important to remember that there are important legal considerations to be taken into account, such as the right to access data sources, the the right to continue using them over time, the importance of privacy and confidentiality, and so on. And within these guidelines, there is a basic scheme shown here in a diagram format, which shows the very sort of high level idea of how a register-based census is conducted. So we start with identifying a range of data sources. So those are the registers and other administrative sources. They might be survey data. There may even be other sources of data, such as commercial sources, for example. Those undergo transformation processes, which, as I said, my colleagues will be going into more detail about what those transformation processes are. The basic principle within that box there is that they get linked together and turned into what we then call a statistical register. And from that statistical register, we then draw and disseminate the census outputs. And notice again the crucial importance of quality measurement and assurance, which underlies the entire process from beginning to end. So that sounds very clear and understandable on the high level, but what exactly do we mean when we say that we're going to take these registers and link them together? What is a register? Well, a register is a systematic collection of unit level data organized in such a way that updating is possible. So it's a complete list of something, whether that something be a list of dwellings, businesses, car owners, people enrolled in school. It's a complete list that is kept up to date. The basic kinds of registers that are required for conducting a register-based census are population registers, registers of buildings and dwellings, and business registers, each of which you will be able to hear about in more detail from my distinguished colleagues over the course of this series. For a register to be suitable to be used in conducting a register-based census, it needs to be complete. That means that it needs to cover the full universe that it sets out to cover. It needs to be accurate, and it needs to be up to date, which comes back to what I just said, that there must be a system for it to be updatable. When something changes, that needs to be reflected in the register. There need to be sufficient variables. So if we go back to the census recommendations, the topics that are supposed to be covered in a census, a register needs to be able to provide those variables. Now, of course, there is no individual register that does have all of those. That's why we need to combine different sources to produce the statistical registers needed. And for that reason, they need to be linkable. We need to be able to link people together across registers. We need to be able to link people to their addresses, that is to where they live. So if we have a list of individuals and we have a list of dwellings, we need to know who lives in which dwelling. We need to be able to link people to a business register in order to know where they're employed. And by where, I mean both by which organizations and physically where, that is their workplaces. And that way we can find out information about, for example, the commute to work. Now, of course, even the best registers will be imperfect. It goes without saying that there is never going to be a register that doesn't have any errors in it or gaps. And there may be some basic variables, even as basic as people's name, date of birth, place of birth, that might differ for one reason or another for the same individual across different registers. So one core principle in approaching a register-based census is to aim for redundancy, by which I mean that we need to have plenty of registers which contain the same variables on a given individual. And we can then designate one of those as the base register. That's the register from which we're going to take the information for that given variable. And then we can use the others, which provide that same variable, as comparisons. And the closer the comparison, if we find that the base register and all the comparison registers have the same information, then we consider that excellent. And if we find that the comparison registers differ broadly, then that will be a sign that we have to do some quality checking. So how do we link together the different sources? The easiest scenario is using a personal identification number. So if there is a particular number that is used across different administrative purposes in a country, then it would be simple to just take that number and link across all the different sources that use that same number. In some circumstances and in some countries, that is either impossible or even prohibited by law, in which case it might be necessary to create a new linkage key, a new personal identification number, specifically for statistical purposes, in this case, specifically for the purpose of conducting a census. This would be a means of ensuring a much greater degree of confidentiality, because it would then be impossible for even those conducting the register-based census to actually identify any given individual in the data with which they're working. So I'm hoping that I've given you a basic overview of the principles of how a register-based census is conducted, each of which is going to be covered in far more detail by others. But as I said at the outset of my presentation, I do want to bring us back to some of the challenges that have to be taken into account in this, because it all sounds very simple when we explain it in these high-level terms. It sounds fine to say, okay, we just get these data, we find the common number and we join them up together, fine. But actually, there are many, many challenges, as my colleagues in national statistical offices will tell you, because they have spent years dealing with these challenges. For example, what do you do if somebody appears in one register and not in another? What do you do if there is no comparison register available for a given variable? If there's only one source, do we have to treat that as the single source of truth? How do we go about filling gaps or correcting inconsistencies? We might be able to think of statistical modeling approaches, imputations that could fill in those gaps quite reasonably, but that might not be acceptable to the public. In some countries, that might not even be legal. We might not be allowed to use modeling to produce census data. And what about variables that aren't included in any register at all? Variables that are recommended in the global and regional recommendations for population and housing censuses, but which cannot be obtained from any administrative source. For example, that might include languages spoken. It might include questions about religion or ethnicity, about people's commute to work, the length of time or the mode of transport that they use. There could be quite some number of variables that are not included in any register. So decisions have to be made about how those will be obtained. Will a survey be conducted just to find out information about those variables? Will they be deemed less important and left out altogether? Those are just some of the very many important decisions that have to be thought about. So I'm afraid I have left you with a page full of questions rather than answers, but given that this is the first presentation of the day, I hope that's not too much of a problem, and I hope that there will be many more questions arising in the course of this webinar. Finally, the very last thing that I would like to mention is that there is a task force ongoing. Many of its members are also connected today. A task force on assessing the quality of administrative sources for use in censuses. And this task force will be producing a set of guidelines which are due to be published next year. So we're in the final stages of editing this work. And I'm going to be telling you rather more about the content of this work the next time I present to you, which will be on the 18th of November. So with that, I hand back to Oleg, and thank you very much for listening to me today.
Дуже вдячні, пані Фіоно.
Thank you, dear Fiona. And I would like to add that all the documents that we received links for during presentation, they will be included into our collection that we will complete after the end of the forum. And of course, we'll grant the open access to this collection. So let's move on. The next speaker, next presentation is on the focus of the transition, the transition process from the traditional to register-based census. So I would like to give floor to Diana Baltadze, who works now as the national expert of Eurostat from Estonia, but has great experience of organizing censuses. So Diana, she headed the project of census in Estonia in 2011, and she was responsible for the preparation to the register-based census during 2014-2019. So, dear Diana, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I try to share my presentation. It takes time. So it is a little bit complicated, it seems to me. Could you help me?
Ms. Baltadze, I'm from technical support. If it will be normal for you, I can share your presentation with all the participants, but I need you to tell me next slide or something like that.
Yes,
that
I will say next if there is a need. Or can you see? I put it, but I'm not sure you will see.
It's my one. I open it. It's my one presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Just tell me next one. I will change.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this interesting evening and useful online forum. I wish that Ukraine will get support and strength to go on in order to achieve objectives in the field of census work. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present my views and to take part in this online forum. I wish you all the best with series of webinars, and all you thank again for contribution to that event. My presentation should cover many topical issues asked by me, and I should say that I am going to highlight the most important aspects, because I am not going to repeat this, what was told by Fiona. And that means that I have reorganized my presentation during these last 10 minutes. So therefore, I would like to skip some slides, but I will say it. The content of my presentation will be as follows. Please, next slide. First, I will talk about the important moments of the strategy choices for register-based census. Then I talk about creating basic preconditions for this kind of censuses. And I will talk less about the need for data requirement and about development of registers and integration, because these topics will be covered in my next presentations, and basic elements were already covered by Fiona. Thank you for her. And as Fiona told you, that we have a lot of challenges regarding of register-based census, more questions than answers. That's because I would like to wish you that you should be able to be very creative to solve these problems, because we don't have common or universal answers to these questions. So next slide, please. Why I would like to start with strategy points. Next, please. Because working on all these details required in transition period towards register-based census, it is possible lost sight of big picture. I was in driver's seat, if we can say so, for census over than 12 years. And I can say, without good strategic plan, you are not going to fly. It will be more or less rocking the boat, as Englishmen say. The primary task for statistical service is to figure out the best way to get from traditional census, let's say point A, to a register-based census, let's say point B. It seems strange, but to propose something is very hard work. Why? Because all censuses are unique and their contextuality has a major impact on census performance. The best advice that could be given is to anticipate potential needs at an early stage. And let's share the vision, future census at state level, at least. It will be good to get some kind of consensus on census prospects. Otherwise, it maybe happens that those who are outsiders in census discussions today may be decision makers in the future, and they may work against your plans. I want to say that statisticians cannot become vulnerable if you have at national level common understandings where you are now and a clear sense of where you want to go to end up. Please provide for decision makers with an assessment of what stands in between these points A and B, and communicate a decision about how to approach the challenge. Regarding register-based census, as a final statement can be confirmed, between at least 4 different strategies. As you can see, they are different due to a specific course of action to undertake. And if there are a lot of questions to answer, but where your problems are increasingly digital in nature, the questions become complex very quickly. You can choose registers and traditional census approach. You can use registers and combined census approach. You can use register-based census and add survey. And you can use register-based census and then additionally conducting full enumeration with interviews. Therefore, it is fundamental to define near, medium, and long-term as well challenges for each of them. Please, next slide. Then you can evaluate and improve your actions and communicate results and success experience, which is very needed by public. You can say these new terms can be defined as stages, the first, the second, and third stage. I will not stop on non-evolutional strategies, as you asked to cover issues for transition period and what can be said, strategy as evolution contains different kind of plans. And it can be noted that the first stage requires from statisticians double effort. It is for the near term. However, this is the time to get impetus from traditional census activities. Please use this time as you can, because benefits from conducting usual census can be exploited for the register-based census purposes for the future. For example, you can collect coordinates for dwellings and establish corrected address database, as it was done during the last census round in Estonia. You can establish household register based on census data, as it was done in Slovenia before register-based censuses. Or you can create statistical register for dwellings, giving numbers to dwellings during last traditional census. It was done in Norway. In brief, during the first stage, it is reasonable to identify all needed data sources for census purposes. And then you can start to create preconditions for register-based census. The second stage is characterized by requirements and drivers for the future. During this stage, you can follow the change in the nature of for census purposes. Actually, register-based census is not a value in itself if it does not meet users' need. Therefore, it is good to know that each stage may include actions that overlap with works from the previous stages. Next. Next, let's talk about preconditions for register-based censuses. You will see this work is essential and can be divided into 6 major groups of different, predominantly simultaneous activities. And none of them can be considered less important. But keywords for all of these activities are creation of communication networks and establishment of documentation on data sources. I know that is not favorite subject for statisticians, but it is obligatory preconditions to move on with register-based census activities. It is, by the way, something very special if we compare to the activities of traditional census. Of course, starting point is creation of legislative framework to support not only statistical service, but data owners. I am not going to say extra words on data security and protection issues because it is basic and nothing special from the point of view of statistical production. But I would highlight activities considering relationship with data suppliers. Data exchange agreements have to consider the legislation and confidentiality constraints and may consider public approval of the use of particular data sources. Data transfer has to be managed in secure environments and under the respect of privacy and confidentiality rules. In order to improve the quality of data in sources, it is good to foresee the need of legal regulation, or it is possible to achieve by changing business processes or developing tools. To better understand all kind of aspects of that work of creation preconditions, I would like to introduce one useful table on page 9, but it is not necessary to move to right now. But because before, I would like to note two important aspects for these activities. First of all, I would like to say cooperation with data providers, ensuring the validity of data for statistical purposes, and involvement users, stakeholders, it is crucial. Therefore, I ask you, please give feedback from these groups, and it is a need to give it timely, and it helps to avoid different kind of misunderstandings. Additionally, I would stress the ability to link data from different sources. But it was told by Fiona, and therefore I would like to just add that you should take care that the census should cover different kind of objects, persons, households, families, living rooms, and there is a need to provide at least two kind of linkages. It is possible, of course, use unique ID codes if they are available at country level for census objects. of the same category. But if it is not, there need to be undertaken the work of creation of these unique codes at the statistical office, and this work based on identifying variables, for instance, using names of or place of birth or so on. The next is linking the objects of two categories, as Fiona told you. For examples, link persons and dwellings. But as you can imagine, even this kind of simple work depends on methodological and technological support. Not to mention that continuous quality assessment for data sources, input data, output data, and statistical process, there is a need to have a very good methodological framework for having register-based approach. And of course, once again, please ask support at least national level. It is very important. Please, next slide. If we, and please once again, if we talk about data requirement, it depends on census program. No one will say what is obligatory to have in your census program, but obligatory is to provide data agreed at the international level. For the transition period, I would recommend 4 simple steps while evaluating and data sources relevance. First, determine if data level information corresponds to the requirement of census told by Fiona. The next, assess the data definitions and concepts and deviations. The possibility this activities for census purposes, but first of all, it should be properly assessed. The third step, determine if the geographical coverage of data source corresponds to census needs. And the last one, determine unit inclusion characteristics. I would say data requirements may be very different. It depends what is your desire. Let's go back to the slide, or let's go to the slide on page 9. Next, please. Most of these descriptions, let's say, are requirements. And we can say that you can use all these data source indicators presented in the first column in data share agreements, and accordingly, you may establish requirements. For example, there were no registered data on occupation and workplace in Estonia before until 2018. But Statistics Estonia established a requirement at national level and told that these data are obligatory to have censuses. And now we got the situation where tax board is providing this data according to the need of quality asked by Statistics Estonia. It took about 4 years, but this data available, and according to, for example, data format was needed by Statistics of Estonia. And we can say that data format for using one data source may be different for different statistical purposes. For example, Statistics Estonia use occupation data for occupation and workplace using XML format, but business statistics uses data using XBRL format. And the same situation with another indicators. Data actualization may be needed differently. For census purposes, maybe there is a need to have once a year updates for these particular data sources. But for another domains, there is a need to have daily basis updates. Therefore, it is a special task to study your agreements and to improve them according to statistics needs and for census purposes. The next slide. The same words regarding data quality can be said. I suggest for transition period a checklist, very simple one. According to the answers on these questions, it can be decided which areas and may be covered by data owners and which areas should be improved by statistical services. These questions are not difficult, but essential. And these questions were posed by Fiona, and there is no need to repeat them once again. Therefore, I skip and I go to the next, to the slide 12. Next, yes. This slide was introduced by Fiona as well when she introduced you how will be register defined. I would just ask your attention that there is a need to have a clear understandings, not only for registers outside for register-based census are 3 of them, and these are already mentioned by Fiona. First of all, coverage of population of each register or data source. All records should be provided with unique identifiers, and all registered data must be regularly updated. Please, next slide. It is obvious that quickest way to solve different kind of problems with registers and registered data is to do as much as it is possible at statistical services or in statistical register system. But it depends. If you are not ready and you are on the stage A, or you just start this work, it is possible to negotiate with register owners and to ask fix problems in registers. I would like to recommend that it is useful and rational to ask correct conceptual mismatches, like regarding definitions, code lists, classificators, and so on, to correct them by data owners, and different kind of incompatibilities with statistical standards, like incomplete coverage for some population groups or statuses or events, or unavailability of variables, or there is a variation degree across country. This kind of problems may be better solved by statisticians. And for the last, I would like to say some words about integration phase. Please, next slide. I will skip it. Next slide. And once again, skip. It is more complex if you use register data and additionally survey data. It is some very special, but in one hand, it is the very it is the same work what is done daily basis by other statistical domains. Yes, it is somehow complex, and there is a need to use statistical methods to overcome problems, but it is not much big problem. The most of challenges during the integration phase are connected with very simple problems or mistakes. I would like to present for you the most common, as if I can say so. First of all, technical quality of addresses. If it is poor, it is very time-consuming activity to integrate different data sets. If addresses are not accurate, for example, people actually don't leave the places reported in registers, it is the real headache. Of course, linking problems and creating households, if you use different concepts for example, for survey purposes and for registers based census purposes. Of course, you can suffer if you have under or over coverage of key registers. For example, if you have over coverage for population in population register, you can use different kind of methods and techniques to overcome of that problem. But if you have under coverage, it is most problematic how to find the proper method to deal with this problem. Of course, it is problematic if you miss information on some topics. For example, you will have register-based census and survey. There is need to work out methodology how to get proper statistics on marginal groups of population, like homeless people and for same-sex couples. And of course, different kind of quality problems of registers may influence, may have influence during the register-based census integration phase. Please, next slide. To conclude, I would say that most important during the integration phase is your readiness to elaborate and implement algorithms, update them, and formation variables based on cross-use of data sources in statistical register system. And to sum up, please, next slide. I would say that statistical office is responsible for the register-based census approach. And you should take care that quality of registers or data sources may have an effect on output data. Therefore, it is a big need to have good cooperation with register owners or data owners and to improve this situation. Smooth functioning of register system also depends on registration culture. Therefore, the need of cooperation is extended to society, and that's because statistical service cannot do it by alone. It should be done in a close cooperation with different institutions and, first of all, register holders or data source owners. Key to success is carefully planned and coordinated long-term efforts by statistical office leadership, registers, government agencies, and general public giving the support and cooperation. And of course, I told you that register-based census, it is not such complicated activity as usual or traditional census. But I would say it is not a simple push of button. Very often it is about decades and years of development of registers and statistical systems behind. Thank you very much for your attention.
Дуже дякую, пані Діано.
Thanks a lot, Miss Diana, for your advice. We can feel that you have an enormous practical experience in organizing censuses, and you know about subtle details that theoreticians do not know. I would like to add that as for the problem of personal identification of people and matching of personal IDs, PINs, to the administrative basis of addresses, we already have several publications from the Census Bureau of the United States, and we will include them into our reference, into our guidance, and you will be able to review them. And now I would like to invite for the presentation Mr. Erik Schulte-Nordholt from Netherlands, from the Statistical Service of Netherlands. He is a senior scientific associate and project leader in Statistics Netherlands, and he is responsible for the Dutch virtual census, and he is coordinating the entire international activities of the service in the sphere of social statistics. From the year 2020, from this year, Mr. Schulte-Nordholt is the leader of the expert group of the European Economic Commission of the UN for Census. And today, Mr. Schulte-Nordholt is representing the topic of quality of the registers, and he will tell us what to do if some data is missing from the registers. So please, Mr. Erik, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. I hope you can all hear me and can also see my first slide. It's always a challenge to give presentations online instead of face-to-face. I also would like to check if I move to the next slide, if you also see the next slide. So I hope you will now see the slide with the contents of my presentation. Is that working?
I'm so sorry, maybe Eric, you need to press start presentation. After that, change it to we can see it in a full screen like that.
I did,
yes.
But it's...
F5 maybe press on your...
No. Now you see, if everything works, the PowerPoint in the first slide. Do you see that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
The first one, but not for the full screen. That's...
No, okay. Then, because on full screen, it's not always working with the Zoom system. But if I now go to the second one, you see the contents?
Yes, second one.
Okay, okay, we do it this way because this is normally working, and the full screen is not always working from a remote.
It's more comfortable for you.
That's fine, that's no problem. It's a pleasure for me to give this presentation this morning. So good morning, everybody. Dobry dzień. It's a long time ago that I was for the first time in the Ukraine, and last year I was back after all those years, and I certainly look forward to go to the Ukraine again and meet so many nice people, and also, if possible, help with statistical activities like the census. But for now, we have a COVID crisis, which means that traveling abroad is very complicated, if at all possible. But I'm very pleased with this option to present and discuss online, and I hope it is of use for all of you. I'm very much impressed by the large number of people joining, so that's very promising. I've been responsible for both the 2001 and 2011 censuses in my country. And currently we are preparing the 2021 census. Those were all register-based censuses. It's a long time ago that my country conducted a traditional census where all people had to fill in the census forms and all the forms were scanned and so on and so forth. That was in 1971. But we did not go in one jump from the traditional approach in 1971 till the register-based approach, a full register-based census in 2001. We had censuses in 81 and 91, but those were not complete. We were missing some information. And what we do is we gradually introduce more and more registers in our census. But then we need to know, are these sources good enough? Are they fit for purpose? So in this presentation, I will focus on ensuring the quality of registers. How can you handle that? And that is also my responsibility in the office, to judge if a certain source is good enough. Can we use it? If not, we have to rely on existing survey data, like survey data of the labor force survey. But over time, the number of variables coming from registers has increased and the number of variables from existing surveys has decreased. And in the next census, there's only one variable left that is coming from existing survey information. That's the variable occupation. All the other variables will come from different registers. So now I will tell you a bit more. I often give 1- and 2-day courses on the quality of registers and how to use them in the census. There's also a lot of work in the UNECE context that Fiona has already presented earlier this morning. And as Diana just said in her conclusions, a register-based census is a nice operation, but it's not just pushing a button. You need to prepare over time. And this is also what I believe in, that you gradually move and you gradually innovate. It's very risky to make a big jump, because if you miss, you have nothing. So if you every round improve, you get a more and more efficient process. So I will say a few words about the quality in official statistics, about the data collection methods, the cost, the response burden, the product quality, and the register-based statistics compared to statistical surveys. And if time allows, I will then also give a follow-up with our quality framework that we have developed in our office and also use in practice to judge this specific quality. So when it comes to quality in official statistics in general, we rely on the definition of quality in statistics in the Code of Practice. That's a European code that is an important basis for us. And there we can distinguish between product quality and process quality. The product quality has 5 components: relevance, accuracy, timeliness and punctuality, comparability and coherence, and finally, accessibility and clarity. And I will discuss all of them in our context. We also have the process quality, which is about the best methods, the cost efficiency, and the low response burden to achieve. The data collection methods has several options. You can run a traditional census where you ask all people to fill in the form, so you ask all the questions. There are different ways to do it, but essentially you get all the information you need from all the people in your country. There's also a full coverage statistical survey as an option. Of course, you can also have a sample survey where only part of the country is interviewed, or maybe a sample survey for some of the census variables. But you also have administrative registers that exist some way in the country that you use. We have to realize that administrative data are collected for administrative purposes. That is a key thing to realize. And it means that register-based statistics in general, and a register-based census in particular, is what I call secondary use of existing data. Sometimes people get a bit puzzled, like, yeah, you have survey data as well, but there is no questionnaire. That's because we use existing data to supplement. Well, if you have those register data, you have survey data, you may have several surveys and several registers where you can find the specific census variables you're interested in. You have to make decisions as an office. You have to make decisions on the data collection method. And this is always a compromise between cost efficiency, the response burden, and product quality. Of course, you want to be as efficient as possible, cost-wise. You also want to lower the response burden on the people in the country and on institutions. That is clear, but does product quality allow you to do so? And where is the decision made? Those are aspects I want to elaborate on further in this presentation. The current situation in many countries that I see and that I have visited over the last 20 years on helping people with their censuses is that the national statistical institutes often face budget cuts or restrictions because statistics produced in a traditional way are expensive, and especially a traditional census is a very expensive operation, and they tend to get more and more expensive over time. That's because of the difficulty to include everybody and the response and so on and so forth. So governments often ask, aren't there cheaper, more modern options? Well, that depends. You can't answer that question in general. On the other hand, our users demand more and more detailed statistics. Knowing that so much information exists, they ask, well, can we get more detailed information? Not only national or regional, but also about all the municipalities and the quarters and the streets and the blocks and so on and so forth. And they also ask for new statistics, new variables, new combinations, new crossings of variables, and so on. So what we must do as statisticians is increase the efficiency in the production of statistics. That is certainly a need, and that's valid for all countries. And we can do so when we use administrative data. That holds for all countries, but what kind of administrative data are available differs from country to country. If you use administrative data, there are almost no costs for data collection, or I should say no extra costs, because the data are already there. So there are no specific collection costs for the National Statistical Institute. You can use resources on improving existing data instead of collecting data for statistical purposes. That is something you can do. So you can supplement and correct existing data. You can look at most resources used in establishing register-based statistical systems, but you have to realize that the systems must be maintained. If you don't maintain the systems, in a few years, they're useless. So you can conclude here that register-based statistics is not free of charge, but normally it's less expensive than sample surveys, and especially than traditional censuses. So that makes a huge difference. Nowadays, what we spend on our census is only about 1% of the cost that we would have spent if we would conduct a traditional census next year. So that's a huge difference. However, setting up such a register-based system is a costly activity. I often say, well, it's difficult to estimate that, but setting it up, those costs are comparable with one traditional census round. So the benefits will come over time. When you have done it, when you have switched, then the next time it's much cheaper. Then you're going to gain money. Then we have the response burden. Use of administrative data means no additional response burden. That's clear, there are no questionnaires. This is important for companies. They say to us, well, reporting to the authorities always takes too much time. However, whatever we do, they always complain because every minute they spend is a minute too much. They would like to spend the time to their products and not to our questionnaires. Citizens complain sometimes, they were saying the authorities shouldn't ask for information that I have already given, maybe to another government authority. Can't you work together? People ask that. That's a logical question. And for the National Statistical Institute, there's an increasing non-response problem in sample surveys and censuses. Traditionally, business surveys and population and housing censuses were mandatory, but it's more and more difficult to get a response percentage close to 100%. And in our social surveys, we don't have the option to make them mandatory. So the response rate is much, much lower than 100%. And that makes it also complicated. Is the result still accepted, and so on and so forth. So we have to think about how to get better quality figures. So the product quality is an important aspect. And there we have, first of all, the relevance. The register data is based on administrative definitions that may differ from statistical definitions. You can't change that. That's reality. So there may be differences according to units, the coverage, the variables, the time references, and so on and so forth. You could say with all this data, we have lots of right answers, but are they also the answers to the right questions? You have a lot of information, but maybe not exactly the information that was asked for. The authorities can be looked at as the picture of the world. And what we do is combining data from different registers to improve the relevance, to come as close as possible to the concept we want to have in our publications. And in some cases, then additional data collection is necessary. But gradually, over the last 25 years, we have moved from an office that was really a survey organization towards a register-based statistical office. And there, the census and the change of the census is prominent in the move of becoming a register-based statistical office. Accuracy is the second important aspect of product quality. Registers normally have good quality for administrative purposes, but that is not always enough in practice because it needs to be good enough for the statistics you produce. There may be some errors, but we're not bookkeepers. We want to have good estimates of the phenomena that we want to publish about. And we can improve the accuracy by combining data from several registers. We do also some editing for statistical purposes. And nowadays, these processes are fully automated. So when some of the data come in, we do some editing procedures just to upgrade the data before we use them in official statistics. That was quite an investment to study and to prepare those programs. But now that we have them, we can run them every year and now and then check if those programs are still doing what they need to do. Then we have timeliness and punctuality, two important aspects. The production time is sometimes longer than for statistical surveys. That is something to realize because administrative processes may take time. A well-known example is that we get access to data from the tax authorities in my country, but only to produce official statistics. That's the key reason that we get access to those data. Many of those data are very accurate and very quickly available for us, but some of the variables, especially about income of self-employed people, may take a very long time. And then you have to decide, when do we stop? When do we start the processes? Maybe before all the data are there, because otherwise the timeliness of your statistics is not so good. There may also be some delays in updating of registers. For example, when people emigrate, people have to tell the municipality where they live in my country that they're going to emigrate, but some people just leave. Well, if they have left, they have left. Then it may take a little while before that is corrected in the register. When a new person moves into the house as well, this person has emigrated, then the register is corrected. So there may be some delays in the updating of registers that you have to take into account. So for the data extraction, it's sometimes necessary to wait some weeks or months, and sometimes even longer. So there's always a balance between the accuracy of your results and the timeliness of your results. And depending on the purposes, you have to find compromises there. Then we have the comparability and coherence. What we did over time is, after some initial projects to get to know all these registers, we have been building a coherent register-based statistical system where we get all the data, check all the data, link all the data, and then we are ready to produce the statistics. So we are also harmonizing the statistics with other information to be more relevant and see how that relates. And here we have lots of experiences in the Netherlands. I don't have the time now to go into those details, but in 1- and 2-day courses, I can give more detailed examples of what we do exactly and how we do it and why we do it, what's the purpose, and so on and so forth. And then finally, the aspect that finishes the product quality is the accessibility and clarity. That's always relevant. Actually, it's almost independent of the data sources used. Then I would like to say a few words about how do register-based statistics compare to statistical surveys. Well, here I go back to 5 different aspects to compare the 2 options. When you look at the costs, or I should say the marginal cost for a statistical institute, register-based statistics are much cheaper because you can skip the whole data collection phase. That is a huge difference, that's clear. Also, the response burden is much smaller because you're not asking people again. You have already received that information as a government before. So those are 2 strong advantages of register-based statistics, and especially of a register-based census. This was also one of the questions that I already saw this morning in the chat box, so I hope this is part of an answer to that question. When it's about the relevance, we have to be careful because we have to realize that not all variables are included in the registers. That's life. We have to live with that. So if a variable is not in any register, you still want to have that in your publications. You have to ask the people or the companies or whatever. So you have to collect the data. So although most of our statistics nowadays are from registers, we still conduct household and business surveys, and we consider them complementary to the information from the registers we have. But more than 80% of what we publish is based on registers nowadays. So you shouldn't leave it out. So the relevance then could be smaller because you miss part of the information you should publish about. Another aspect is you have less direct control over the data content. The data are collected by another organization for another purpose. Of course, we talk to all the different owners of the registers in our country, and we get informed and we work nicely together and we help each other. That is really a very nice and huge change over the last 25 years. But in the end, we have to realize that other organizations have another purpose to collect those data as a primary purpose. We are making secondary use of it. But it's important to know what's in it, what's the quality, when will it be available for the statistical processes in our office. When it comes to accuracy, you can't say this or this is better. That depends in practice. So sometimes the register has better information, sometimes a survey or a census. You can't say in general. What I do know in my own country currently is that the response on household surveys is relatively low compared to the old days when all people were so nice to answer all the questions, that the quality of the register-based statistics is much better than of the household surveys, because you have so much more information and it's also tested better. But of course, there are also aspects that you miss in the registers, like black income or illegal people. Well, then it's really difficult to use registers only. You need to make estimates and do some checks and some surveys to find out more. And when it comes to timeliness, we don't have the registers in our hands. So we are dependent on when they are available. But we can say, well, if this register becomes available in October, then we can start the processes. Maybe we wanted to start in January, but then you wait 3 months. Well, you can start as soon as you have the registers. If you have your own surveys or your own traditional census, you make the process exactly in such a way that it fits neatly to your publication scheme. So that could be a disadvantage. But this is my kind of personal appreciation of the different aspects. There are pluses and minuses. But for us, the cost and response burden are the key issues, and we accept the also sometimes negative aspects of using registers. So what do administrative registers offer? Well, they have in principle total coverage at a low cost, because we more and more publish about the population of the registers. So we publish about the registered population, for example. We publish about the companies in the business register. So we get total coverage at a low cost. And statistics for small groups are possible that are not possible if you have a sample survey. With our census, we can make very detailed counts on small areas, for example. That is a very nice aspect of our system. We don't need to wait 10 years for another census. We have what we call annual updates for the key variables. Not everybody is interested in all the census variables every year, but some variables you would like to see much more often than once every 10 years. And in a European Union context, we're also working on some combination of population and census statistics to have yearly updates, to have more relevant and more frequent data available for our users. So we think that to produce statistics based on administrative data has proven to be efficient. But we should never forget that register-based statistics have to be supplemented by information from sample surveys. I could elaborate for many more hours. There are also some other slides on how we exactly are judging which register is fit for purpose, but time doesn't allow me to go into those details. But what I would like to say about the other slides that I'm not going to discuss now is that in our last census, the 2011 census, the variable level of education attained, so the highest level of education that people attained, was still a survey variable. We reused microdata from the labor force survey. Nowadays, our education register is of such good quality that this is better information than the survey information. So we will switch from the 2011 census towards the 2021 census, from a variable on education based on survey information to a register-based information. And this was very carefully studied. Can we make this step? What do we have to do, etc., etc. And well, so there is a lot of work there to do before you make the switch, because you don't want to lose quality. You want to test beforehand, etc., etc. Well, I think I will conclude here. And of course, if there are questions later on today, I'm very happy to try to answer them. Thank you for your attention.
Дуже вдячний пану Еріку.
Thank you so much, dear Eric, for your comprehensive presentation and for respect for our timing. And I would like to inform to all participants that Erik Schulte-Nordholt already agreed to join the international group of experts that will work together with Ukrainian colleagues on the further steps of implementation of the transition project to register-based census. Thank you so much. So let's now move to the last presentation for today, and I give floor to Janusz Dygaszewicz from our neighbor Poland. He is the director of the ICT systems, director of the Central Census Bureau in Poland, and also director of Geostatistics and Census Department. And he's the president of European Forum of Geography and Statistics and member of the Executive Committee of Global Management on Geospatial Information, and a participant of high-level group of European modernization of statistics. So the topic of his presentation is transforming administrative data to statistical data. So dear Janusz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oleg, for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, it is a pleasure to introduce some information concerning transforming administrative data to statistical data. Can you see my presentation full screen or not?
Yes, we can see full screen.
Okay. So thank you. And let's go to the presentation. The first issue is why are we processing administrative data? External customers expect from statistics high quality data as soon as possible and at the lowest possible level of territorial aggregation, town level or lower, like block of streets. In order to meet these expectations, public statistics are gathering more and more data from administrative and non-administrative sources in order to improve the quality of data provided. There is also a slow but constant process of refusal to participate in statistical surveys across Europe. We observed this. And also there are economic consideration and associated limited financial resources coming from budget. It is also very high importance. Thanks to the use of data from administrative sources, it is possible to limit the contacts of statistical enumerators with respondents, which is extremely important now during the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, anticipation of a high quality data as possible has result in a significant burden on economic entities, companies, which often makes it more difficult to conduct a business in and increases its cost. Therefore, due to the widest possible use of data from administrative sources, it is planned to significantly relieve our partners, data providers, from reporting obligations. So this is the reason that we try to use administrative register for data gathering. And also data from administrative register used in public statistics are increasing. In addition, they are increasingly have a better quality, which significantly contributes to increasing the use of administrative data. In recent years, employees of public statistics have gained great knowledge about administrative register. So gained unique experience necessary to use the data in full from administrative register. Appropriate IT systems have been implemented, which enable large data sets to work, improve the quality, and integrate to the extent necessary. So I think that there are main reasons that we use administrative data. Of course, there are also some objectives of work. Processing of data from administrative sources. This is the main objective for this processing is to achieve a set of variables, values collected for groups of statistical products and change into a set of data corresponding to the standards adopted in official statistics, which is a basis for the development of result information and conducting analysis. So in Poland, we use for census 40 registers. In Poland, we have, it is funny to say, but it is true, we have almost 600 registers. So we choose 40 for our censuses. And they are coming from a Ministry of Finance, Interior Administration, Justice, Social Insurance, Health Fund, from Geodesy and Cartography, and marshal offices, county offices, commune offices, regional offices. So as you can see, we have open and direct access to this data with no costs. So we have good situation because it is based on our law. It is regulated by special act, Census Act, and we have free access to this resources. How we can use administrative sources and how we use, let's say, as a direct source of data. So it means that part of variables we received directly from administrative sources. Another usage is administrative sources is also used and suited to create a census frame. And in addition, it is a source of information for imputation, data estimation, comparison, the quality of data, calibration. So it's a lot of other possibilities to use administrative sources to support data processing process of statistical production. And there are some advantages of using administrative sources. Of course, our colleagues mentioned part of them. For sure, it is efficient use of existing sources, cost reduction, reduction of social burden, improved data security. It is very important also. Availability on annual basis. As Eric said, it is possible to organize annual update for some variables, census variables. Also availability of data from administrative register for any level of territorial disaggregation, because it is very easy use administrative data because they normally have addresses, and we can link this with XY coordinates. So it means that finally we can aggregate and disaggregate as we wish according to some chosen area. And as it was mentioned, this is in the indirect estimation. We can make some models at the chosen unit level. So it is very easy to use administrative data to such modeling. And also the risk arising from the use of administrative sources, this lack of availability of all recommended information. Our colleagues mentioned this. It is also dependence of official statistics on state administration bodies. So it is very important to have proper cooperation to keep eye what is going on in registers conducted by other bodies, by owners of these registers, because if we want to stable our statistics based on administrative sources, we have to have a good cooperation, and because it is very high risk of dependence on other bodies. And also some changes in the legislation affect the quality of statistical obtained. So again, it's a position of Director General of the Statistical Institution is very important to have influence of some changes in the legislation concerning other bodies concerning information system in country. Of course, there are some problems with compliance of critical moment of census, because it is, this timeliness is very important, and problem resulting from imputation and statistical integration of data from different sources. It is typically a methodological issue. So some other aspects of using administrative sources, it is illegal aspect, methodological, and technical. We can divide it on three main aspects. So they are very important from determining the scope of data provided, frequency, data and place of data providing. So it is a lot problems with which we have solved regarding usage of administrative sources. Also, there are methodological and quality issues. Eric said this, described this a lot. So also another issue, technical, because acquiring data in electronic format in appropriate statistical formats for statistics, it is some difficulties regarding web application, data collection, processing platform, hardware, software, linking statistical systems with owners, register owners system, and there are a lot of issues. So how we organize our process. The IT environment of data processing is an operational database of microdata. It is in the right side, operational microdatabase, which has the ability to communicate with our IT system of official statistics, thanks to which it is possible to integrate data from statistical service, statistical operations with data from administrative sources. It communicates with the meta-information subsystem, where all information about the process data sets in place. So the converted data is exported to microdata analytical database in order to compile results data and create analysis. This operational microdata base operates three interconnected systems which are used for systematic work on data from administrative sources, with the possibility of using other types of data, for example, from statistical surveys and others. So as you can see, there are a system of transformation of administrative register, variable quality register system, and statistical operation system. So I try to explain more about this. This system processing of administrative data is a separate special area in operational microdatabase environment where administrative registers are processed in the format available from the data owners. So final product is a statistical register, and the recipients of other statistical statistics Poland units. So this main processes we conducted in this is a development of set conversion rules. This conversion rules are individually for each data set. This also we convert sets of data to flat tables for the and make the duplication and transposition. And next is elimination of incorrect records in data. The process consists also improving the quality of data, complementing data on the basis of other features in the set, from some dictionaries, from some other sources. So we try to improving the quality of data. And next, complementing data as a result of integration with other data sets, cleaning data using defined dictionaries. It is a very important stage, and correction of data on the basis of logical rules. It is a methodological issue which improving the quality of data also. Some conversion of values to standards, and development, the calculation of ad hoc quality statistics. So, for example, there is in Poland a special system, TERIT system for territory division or whole Poland, coming from voivodeship, powiats, gminas, up to smallest polygons, like enumeration area. And finally, we also have system of geocoding for adding XY coordinates to each address. And it covered whole country. So regarding this variable quality system, this is automated system for calculating basis quality indicators and creating reports. The application was also created in response to the increasing interest in the data from administrative registers. And this system is used to study quality improvement and report creation for all data from administrative register that is processed by the statistics of Poland. So this system giving us data in tabular form, filtering data by selected attributes, sorting data, reset some attributes, export the selected report for several usage. So this is a very important system to keep eye on the quality of data coming from register, from this 40 register which we use for census. And also the main information that we receive, it is a metadata information like data provider name and the special number, interior number, status, also some information on tables, like each name of table, number of variables, number of records. So this is full information concerning quality of each register and each variable in registers. So it is a very helpful system. The first system is a statistical operations system. It is a statistical, is a system which in automated and dynamic way based on input data and algorithms describing the method of data processing allows to generate variables for a specific population concentrated in separate thematic blocks. So this final form will be appended evolutionary. The purpose is to use potential data from administrative sources to create statistical variables, which are then used to compile and result of survey and to carry out statistical analysis. So it is a schema of this situation. The whole process begins with acquisition and import of data from administrative sources, where through the process of cleaning and enrichment takes place. And then the data is loaded into the data component transformed from where through this system and mechanism, the result is generated in the form of list and domain tables. So this the domain tables, it is a product of this statistical operation system, and these products are statistical variables grouped into thematic domains, which are linked with a unique linkage key, allowing the creation of multidimensional and cross-sectional statistical surveys based on data from administrative sources. Domains are created from data layers, which may be single tables with data from administrative sources, as well as other statistical and non-statistical data from for the output of variables for the final products. This is some example. And at the end, I want to show how we build a list of population, buildings and addresses. It is preparation for census in next year. There are three main stages. It is preparation list of the address and housing based on the address identification system in streets, real estates, buildings. We have a special statistical registers and database, including inhabited and uninhabited flats located in residential and non-residential buildings, and with the special addresses, geocoded addresses. And second stage is the preparation list of person with assigned home addresses to link this. And finally, integration of list constituting the basis for implementation of the population housing census. And the purpose of building a list of person is to create a broad, comprehensive, and subjectively compilations describing the population for census 2021 and annual censuses after 2021. And the construction of the list of the person was based on the integration of data from many sources to obtain a consistent image of collected data. It was assumed that the integration key would be a personal identification number, because this PESEL spin, it is the main identifier found in the most Polish administrative sources. It is very a good situation that almost all our register possess this ID number for each person. So we also use other sources, and it is for building this final statistical data. So as you can see, for frame population list, we use seven registers. It is a register of personal identification number, national register of taxpayers, social insurance, agriculture social insurance, national health fund, agency for restructuring and modernization of agriculture, and Ministry of Digital Affairs. So we combine this and select groups of person according to this schema. Because if we merge together all the seven register, we finally found 40 million, more than 40 million unique PIN numbers. But population is about 38 and 400. So it means that we have to clean this data to transform for statistical usage. So we remove dead people, which we found because from another sources we know that these people already gone. So also we reduce of people age 19 and over, and not reduce but mark them and check that it's possible that they still active and life. And people who left Poland will reduce. The next step, it is the explanation how this process of cleaning of data is coming. So this is the case. And also we reduce residents and recipients of pensions outside of Poland, because we have such information. So look at this number bottom, so it is decreasing. And for example, we also reduce people which appear only in one register. It is impossible to be active and in Poland and appear only one register. We check our register. If somebody appear only one register, we reduce these people from the population register because it is probably some mistake or people not existing more. So finally, also reduce people with residence address outside of Poland, and finally achieve 38 and 400, and it is the initial frame for census research. And based on this, we conduct census. And it was done in 2011 in similar way. And now we also prepare this for 2021. And ending my presentation, I also want to stress that we also use a non-public information system like information for enterprise operating system from enterprises operating in the field of electricity sales, conducting an economic activity. Also some system which we have with our address identification system for street real estate. So we check this and try to find people living in such dwellings. So also we use some check some addresses from existing surveys, but register them in our system. But we cannot find them in administrative sources. So it is reason that we check such situation, and if we confirm that somebody exists, we add them. Okay, there are some schemas of the data processing. As you can see, it is a lot of information concerning each unique unit in the this population frame. Okay, and in conclusion, the presented method of building a list of persons based solely on the data from administrative sources and will allow coverage of full population of people who should be examined during the census. It allows full integration with other subjects, ensure high quality of data. It is a fully automatic and repeatable process. We also applying this process for annual surveys. And also we have quality control at every stage of processing, transforming, cleaning data. And of course, it is ready to use in a future annual censuses, this annual update, which will in the EU start from 2025 for data from 24. So thank you very much. That's it.
Дякую дуже, пане Яноше. Дуже цікаво було дізнатися.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting to find out not only about theoretic framework that you use when working with administrative data, but also about algorithms of work with the data or practical solutions and technical solutions that you use. I think this information will be of great use for Ukraine. So one more time, I would like to thank all the panelists. The presentation program has been completed for today, and now we can move to the Q&A session. Of course, it's a very interesting and non-trivial matter. The questions are asked in the chat on Facebook page, and replies to some of them have been already obtained, but some of the questions were sent to the panelists, not to the participants. That's what I will read the question. in the order they were obtained, and the panelists will try to look the answers for them. If some of the questions were already answered, then I will just read that answer. So first question. So the stages of forming of the model of electronic consensus and its worth. I think we have found out the answer to this question about the stages, yes, that need to be taken to move to register-based census. As for the cost of model formation, Mr. Eric Schulte-Nordholt, he gave us the number that all the process of preparation to the census on the basis of administrative sources can cost as much as the traditional census, but in the future, census will cost up to 1% of the total amount of the traditional census. So it's very economically grounded. So does anybody want to add? Anyone of the panelists?
Maybe I should explain a bit further, because what you mentioned is certainly a correct summary of my presentation. But going back to this 1% of the cost of a traditional census is only possible if you have a complete, a fully register-based census. What you see often is that countries gradually move from traditional towards combined, towards fully register-based. So you cannot reach, in my view, a direct jump from 100% to 1%. That takes time. But this is a prospect for the future. If you gradually move and more variables are available from registers that you can use in your census, you will reduce costs over time. And this is the way we worked.
Thank you for the explanation, dear Eric. Next question. Formation of the state policies which will consider the needs and problems of different groups is impossible without data disaggregated by sex. How is this problem solved when it's register-based census? If it is not solved, then which are additional activities to help solving it?
Oleg, can you repeat that question, please?
Okay, let me do that in English. Can you hear me in English? Okay. So the development of national policies that take full consideration of issues of various groups of citizens is not possible without the availability of data with sex disaggregation. How is this issue addressed in censuses based on administrative data? If it's not addressed, which could be the additional measures to address the issue of gender disaggregation of administrative data?
Well, if I can, I'm not one of the panelists today, but if I can just quickly answer that. It's quite obvious that sex is one of the most important variables in any census. Virtually every census characteristic is analysed by sex, and particularly with gender analysis being so important these days, that is absolutely vital. My guess would be that any put the population, any data in more or less any population register, if it's relating to individuals, will collect information on the sex of the individual. So there may be examples where that isn't the case, but my guess is that most administrative registers, when they're talking about individual persons, will have their name and their sex as a basic characteristic, which is one of the things that Fiona was mentioning when she was saying you compare one register with another to make sure that all the data is available. And I'm sure if one register doesn't have sex assign to a person, another one will.
Дякую за роз'яснення, Іан.
Thank you for the explanation. And welcome to the panelists today.
Так, вибачте, перемикав мови.
I'm sorry, I was switching the languages. How, during the census, we can avoid double counting or undercoverage of internally displaced people when we have no full-fledged demographic register of people, please? So how can we avoid double counting or undercoverage of people who were forcefully displaced when we have no dedicated register for that?
I would say that undercoverage, to avoid undercoverage is very easy, because if you have unique identifiers, it is a very easy task and there is nothing special. It is like during a traditional census. But regarding undercoverage, yes, it is problematic. There are a lot of different methods. First of all, you can use you can have cross use of data sources, but actually, I can say, based on my own experience, that it may improve quality of statistics a little bit for different marginal groups. So there is a need to use varied statistical methods to deal with undercoverages. But overcoverage, it can be solved as well based on cross use of different data sources, and it is because it is possible to get the new information which is useful for the statistical decision about persons. It is like during traditional census, if the person will say that he is king of Norway, you cannot put you cannot use this data. You will correct this data, and that cross use different data sources. It is very useful, but yes, there is problem with undercoverages, and there is a need to use statistical methods for imputation and for weightings and so on and so on.
Maybe I can add also that in my country, with a register-based census, the people in the census, that's the registered population, that is not exactly the same as the usual residence population, where you count exactly the number of people who are usually resident in your country. So the difference between the two concepts exists, and you have the overcoverage and the undercoverage. And although all the tables we publish are based on the registered population, additional to the census publications, we make estimates of over and undercoverage, and thus the difference between the estimated usual resident population and the registered population. To give an example to illustrate that, in our last census, the 2011 census, we counted 16,655,799 people. That's the official census count in our country on the 1st of January 2011. Then we had two estimates. We have an estimate of the number of people who are in the register, but who died or emigrated or were double counted, and that's about 30,000 people. If you wait long enough, the register is better, but then you lose timeliness. So those were included, but they shouldn't have been included. We found out later. But A more severe aspect is the undercoverage. In my country, there are some people who don't have a legal status, but they're staying in the country nevertheless. And we use methods to find out how many of the people in the census are in this group. We don't have a register of them, of course, that's logical, but we use statistical methods like the catch-recatch method to make an estimate of those people. And we estimate them to be about 200,000 people. So we have an overcoverage of 30,000 and an undercoverage of 200,000. So the registered population, the exact count that I just gave, is approximately 170,000 people too small. So the estimate is 1% too small. It's not a big difference, but we don't assume that the distribution of the population by all the different census variables will be much different if we would correct for that. So all the census tables are there, and we have an additional publication on these aspects. And of course, in different countries, the amount of under and over coverage may be different. That's clear. But the way you estimate it can be similar. So I think we can learn from each other how we can estimate these under and over coverage and just the difference between the two concepts in any country.
Yes, I agree with Eric. It is a missed area of estimation. Who knows, we have over coverage or under coverage. We can estimate only this. And this is a reason that we conduct census, because census is the best tool to achieve more precision information. So in presentation, I presented how we preparing initial list of population, a frame of population before census, processing some seven administrative data for achieve the best situation concerning list of people which should be examined. So one of the main aim of census is to check this and achieve after census more precise information about population. So before we prepare, according to situation which we found in administrative register, make some estimation, and during census check this, and finally we can correct this and achieve the best, our best final result to prepare such frame for next 10 years. Because on the basis of this frame we will conduct our annual surveys. So sample, we prepare sample for sample surveys. So it is a very important issue during census to achieve the best population frame for future activity in statistics. So we never know what is the exact number. We can only estimate before, check during census, and use them as a basis for next annual next year's for next annual survey. Thank you.
Дякую дуже, колеги, панелісти.
Thanks a lot, dear colleagues, dear panelists, for very detailed and well-founded answers. Let's move on. We have a question. We are interested in international practice of the results of electronic census. So as far as I understand the question, it concerns whether there are any differences in distribution and use of the data of the register-based censuses compared to the traditional censuses, please?
Can I say something, Oleg? The census, the way that countries do a census, it entirely meets national needs. The census is really a black box. The data that comes out of it, when it's been processed and checked and quality assured, when it comes out in the publications or online, is the same. It should be the same data, however it's collected. The user and the dissemination of it will be no different. So I would imagine users will use census data regardless of how it's been created. In fact, in some countries, and I'm sure Eric may well comment on this, users really don't even know how the census data is used. They will know they didn't have to fill in a census form, so they may realize that the data has come from administrative sources. But hopefully the data will be seamless. It shouldn't make any difference whether it's come from a traditional field enumeration or a register. The only problems that are the NSO having to make sure that the data is transformed in the way that Janos described, in a way that the data is deemed to meet all the quality criteria that Eric very clearly described earlier.
Yes, that's certainly true. And maybe I can add that in 1971, all people got the census form and all the census forms had to be filled in. In 1981, in my country, that was no longer necessary. And some people asked, why am I not getting a census form? But after all these years, people are no longer asking this question. People know there are no census forms. Sometimes people who have immigrated from a country where census forms are common, they ask it, but people say, no, we don't have it. People are very much interested in the results of our statistics. All the census variables are relevant because otherwise we wouldn't include them in our census. That's clear. And people want to know very detailed information and cross-classify, etc., do analysis and so on and so forth. But they care less and less about which source do we use. Is it a register? Is it a survey? Is it population statistics? Is it census statistics? As long as the quality is good and the data are accurate and the timeliness is fine, people are happy. And that's what I call the secret of the statisticians nowadays. We have lots of different sources. We evaluate all the sources, and by combining, we get the best out of it. All the methods are public. We publish them on our website, but that's more for specialists. The general public is mainly interested in the key outcomes of our statistics. And that's how we work nowadays. That's something to realize, that the word census is less relevant. What matters to the people is accurate and timely statistical information. That is what people really need. The policymakers, the researchers, and the public at large.
Добре, дякую.
Very good, thanks. Thanks, Eric. So for the next questions, they are very specific. First, how can we evaluate, maybe absolutely, the amount of funding used for the development of the necessary infrastructure in order to carry out digital censuses in the European countries? Maybe you can have a general estimation for the information. What time does it take on average to develop this infrastructure? And finally, what qualification do we need? What experts, specialists do we need in order to engage them into this work, to prepare a country for digital censuses?
Regarding Estonian case study, we started very early in 2008. We started preparatory works for register-based census. And what can be said, it is the simplest task to create infrastructure, proper infrastructure for digitalization of different systems. But what is the problem? It takes time to create a framework, legislative framework and methodology framework for that census. Because if I may give one example, for example, to prepare population register data for register-based census, it took about 6 years. But to get readiness or willingness of population register owners to have a cooperation with Statistics Estonia, it took about 20 years. That means that negotiation is the essential and time-consuming in this work. Actually, building infrastructure based on different technologies, it is not the complex activity. It is problematic sometimes, but it is not complex activity. I can say that it is possible to establish register in 2 years for census purposes, but only for census purposes. But it depends on what kind of resources are available for country and what is the indicator for willingness to cooperate and to understand the common purpose of that work.
If I can add something to what Diana said, I mean, she's absolutely right. But she sounds as if it is quite sort of pessimistic. It's going to take a long time. And I think the trouble with what people in the Ukraine want to know is really how long can they do it? Now, I think Diana's estimate of 6 to 10 years, depending on the circumstances of public acceptability, user acceptability, a legal framework, is true. But that's if you've got the registers in the first place. My understanding is that the problems that the Ukraine will have is that in many cases, the EU registers themselves don't even exist yet. So you have to create the registers before you can use the registers for the census. Now, if that's the case, then the time frame for an effective register-based census in the Ukraine may be even longer. And the best that can be hoped for in 2030 is a combined census where you use whatever good registers you've got to supply some of the information you need. But it is a long process. I think Eric talked about what happened in the Netherlands, but I think Finland, was one of the very first countries to do it. And that took 30 years. But that was 30 years ago when technology wasn't as good. But it is a long-term process. That is true.
Yes, indeed. We have to discuss the situation with registers in Ukraine. As far as I know, more than 300 administrative registers exist. And for several years, the population register has been developed, but it's far from being completed. I hope that during the second webinar, 1 week from today, we shall manage to find out more about the current status on the registers of Ukraine from the representative of the digital transformation. Thank you for the answer, dear colleagues. Next question. Are there international quality standards of administrative registers? If so, then how are they managed? How are they controlled?
Maybe I can come in here. the forthcoming guidelines that I referred to are going to be not international standards as such, but international guidelines for assessing quality. So it's going to be sort of step-by-step guidance for countries to be able to assess the quality of a source for whatever stage in the process they're using it, whether that be whether they're using it for excuse me excuse me the guidance is looking at source quality, process quality, output quality. So as Eric went into more detail, those are going to be circulated for consultation among all member countries early next year. So you will get view of that in its almost complete stage within the next few months. And I will be talking about that more in a subsequent webinar.
Добре, дякую, Фіона.
Thank you, Fiona. And interrelated question. Are there criteria of readiness of the country to register-based census? Are there formal signs where you can tick off and say, yes, this country is ready?
May I answer? I think it is not so easy work to simply sign something and we move from traditional or combined register into administrative registers. It is evolutionary process, not revolutionary. Signing is revolutionary. It is evolutionary because the problem is not in, let's say, technology. It is very simple to prepare infrastructure which be enough for register-based census. The main problem is the mentality of people. Because it is very, very difficult, to, especially as a big country, because can you observe that the register base is mainly applied in the small country, like not more than 20-25 million people. Because in Estonia, almost everything was prepared from scratch. And it was easy to project, construct, and build such an approach. But in the Poland, for example, we have 600 registers. Oleg said that in Ukraine, 300 registers. It is a history. It is a deep history, sometimes in tradition, to use some solution concerning administrative process, also a statistical process. Also, we have a lot of people in the academic people spread it in the whole country, and they have methodology, they have approach, they have a lot of thoughts concerning how statistics should work. And suddenly we say, okay, we start from register, not data collection by enumerators, not data collection by internet or telephone. With, for example, now in COVID pandemic, telephone acquisition by telephone, CATI method. It is very, very impressive now that we can collect a lot of data by telephone, because avoid face-to-face data collection, and also use administrative data, internet data, all channels. We use all channels to collect data, and this is a step forward. And step by step, we're preparing to use finally registers. But there are a lot of obstacles and resistance coming from some methodologists. They say, oh, register is not enough, not good quality. You know, this is a mentality of these people. It is impossible to sign something and say, okay, from tomorrow we're starting only from register. So of course, there is a big discussion about quality of data. Because we have a lot registered, but and this quality improving year per year. We observe this, we describe this, and have a discussion with scientists and academia that maybe it is the best source. No, the best is face-to-face, asking somebody about something, because we can check something and correct the answer if it is necessary, and blah, blah, blah. So it is not, especially in big countries, it is not a very easy job to move. We used in last census 10 years ago, in 2011, also about 36 registers, and now we use 40, and maybe 10 years ahead, in 2030, we move fully to register, because it is also some conditions from outside, like obligation to prepare and send to Eurostat from 2025 annual updates. So it means that we have to use only register, because it is impossible to use a traditional census year per year. So it's a lot of factors around us to make final decision in evolutionary way only. I don't think that it will be a natural solution to sign something and from tomorrow we will have a register-based census. Thank you.
Діано, будь ласка.
Please, Diana.
If I may, I would like to highlight the producer of census statistics is charged with the task of supervising the quality of data for census for statistical purposes. And it is up to statistical service to say what kind of data sources should be studied, should be used, and what is sufficient data quality regarding of needed core topics for census purposes. Therefore, all kind of recommendations, it is given to have good decisions regarding statistical providing statistics to users, because your users won't use statistics if it does not reflect if it does not provide needed data. Therefore, it is very important to study your users' need, your possibilities, and main role should be given to statistical office or statistical service. No one else in Geneva or in Brussels or elsewhere will say what is right or what is not. But these statistics should be provided in transparent way and according to agreed quality criteria, which were built today. Thank you.
Maybe I can add to what Diana said, because I've been visiting quite a number of countries and thinking about the future of their censuses. And there's always a long run. Where would you like to be in the long run? What kind of census would you like to have then? And there's the short run. What are the steps you can take for the next census? How to improve the situation? Are you improving the quality, the efficiency, the methods, etc., etc.? So it's difficult to say, well, now we have this kind of census, but you can say, well, we make a step in the right direction. What is feasible given the legal situation, given the IT situation, the human resources, the financial situation, but also very importantly, what kind of registers already exist or don't exist? What's their quality? Do we know it? Do we have good contact? There are so many aspects to study in the short run. And then you make decisions like, what is feasible in this country? And I think you always have knowledge from other countries that you can use, but you should carefully study the situation in a specific country. You cannot simply copy the approach of one country to another. That's at least my experience in the countries that I've been visiting over the last 20 years. But maybe Ian White can also add to that, because he has also been visiting quite a number of countries and helping them with their censuses.
Well, I can't add anything further from that, Eric. Only that there are a number of checklists one could make. The guidance that the UNECE is about to publish does list, and I think other documents do it as well, does list a number of essential preconditions which a country must have before it can contemplate a register-based census. And two of them I'll just mention. There must be a legal framework. I think this has been stressed already. There must be the authority and the power of the Statistical Office to use data that isn't theirs, that's owned by other people. And that can only be done through a legal act. And then the other one is there must be a nationally unique reference number that a register will have, so that when you assess the quality of a particular register in the way that Diana's described, one of the characteristics is it linkable? Can you link it to another register through a unique ID? And I must just explain something I said earlier about it implying that the Ukraine did not have any registers. Of course, it has lots of registers, as Oleg says, 600, but very few national registers. Many of these registers are local, and you must have a consistent national register in order to be able to use it. And the linkability is another key factor. So when you're assessing a register, to be able to tick off, say, yes, we're ready to go, you've got to have that ability to link it with other data. A register on its own is of little use. You have to link it with other data. So linkability and legal authority are the two key predominants. So when you can tick those off, then you can start to look about the quality of the other aspects of the quality that Diana referred to.
Пане Олег, мікрофон, будь ласка.
Перепрошую.
I am sorry, I didn't turn it on. Thank you, dear colleagues. I would like to say that obviously there is no silver bullet. There is a number of points in the checklist, and we need our own checklist of the criteria in Ukraine to assess the relevance of the administrative registers and our legal framework. So then we need to decide whether the country is ready to hold a census-based or register-based census. So I think that for the next year, this will be our path. So we are already overdue with time very significantly. So please, if anyone wants to leave, you can go. But so far, we can continue to discuss the questions. Of course, we have questions about the advantages and the drawbacks of the register-based censuses compared to traditional censuses. But I think that we have already discussed this question in many details by all the panelists. The next one is very specific. Which registers can help to measure the internal and external migration, of course, for the aims of statistics of the population, please?
Can I just, by way of a response, maybe to inspire somebody else to say something, that the most countries will have to start with, will need to have a population register. And I will say something about this tomorrow. So I don't want to preempt what I'm going to say tomorrow. But one of the main uses of a population register are usually for uses by the government responsible for internal security or home office sort of responsibilities. And one of those would be to measure the immigrant status or the residency status of the population. Eric mentioned earlier that one of the difficulties is if you leave the country or come into the country, you have to register that in order to be recognized as being usually resident. So a population register, which I will say more about tomorrow, is one of the measures that you can have to assess, one of the registers you can have to assess the immigrant or the residency status of the population. And that, I think, is a fundamental register that you need. But I'll be saying more about that tomorrow, so maybe you can wait till then.
Well, I think you have inspired me to say something as well here. It's indeed true that a population register is very helpful for a register-based census. It's a crucial register, or as I call it, it's the backbone of our register-based social statistics in general and the register-based census in particular. And we do our best as a country to have this register up to date every day. So every day, a lot of people, both citizens and civil servants, do some work to keep this register up to date, both in terms of who is in the register and who's no longer in the register, but also in terms of the variables of this register. When it's about immigrants, not all the information you would like to know about immigrants will be in the population register. So the immigration service normally has also additional information about why did a person migrate. That is very relevant information, but that's not in our population register. So such information is available from the databases in our immigration service that we are allowed to use as well in our statistical office. So migration is always partly in population and census statistics, but also partly in specific migration statistics.
Diana, будь ласка.
Diana, please.
I would like to add and to say that actually enumeration of immigrant and emigrant people, it is the most problematic in case of register-based census, and you should know that. It is this kind of problem is related to the country of residence. And if you know there are a number of international regulations how a person country of residence for census, and you can use even different kind of administrative data sources for that purposes. But for example, like register for working permissions or without permissions, register for foreign students or register for temporary workers, register for asylum seekers, and so on. And of course, basically, you can find this information from population register. But what is the problem? It is a problem that if we use registers data or data, it is very complicated to determine a person's country of residence, because if during the traditional census, generally persons become a permanent residents only after living in a country for months, and he will say whether he intend to leave a country or not. But from registers, unfortunately, it is not possible to check persons' intention in all these cases asked by different regulations. And therefore, it is the problem and problem. And it is problem because it is if you are not going to use full enumeration or survey, it's completely unrealistic to get this information whether the people going to see for at least year or plan return to country back in current year. In different countries, this problem is solved differently. For example, in the countries, in Italy and in Spain, it is very popular to use science of life method to determine the resident population. But relation between temporary and permanent residents may also be somewhat confusing in registers. For many different reasons. Yes, if it is a problem, I suggest to use additionally survey data because only during interviews at traditional census and during you can determine immigrant people. And you should know, yes, fixing country of residence, and it is more complicated for register-based census as it is for traditional census. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Diana. I would also like to say to what Ms. Fiona Willis-Nunez said for the participants joining us from on the Facebook, or people who don't have the possibility to read our chat. There are so many materials on the experience of the countries regarding evaluation of administrative registers for their potential use in the censuses of population, and in general, regarding the shift from the traditional to the register-based censuses. So this information is available publicly on the website of the expert group of the ECE of the United Nations. And after the end of the forum, we will be able to share all those materials in our guidance. So those materials, a lot of them have been translated into the Russian
So for those participants who joined via Zoom, you will find the links in the chat of Fiona. So thank you again, and let's move on. So the following question, it's the question to Diana. So you have specified that the transition strategy to electronic census is created on the basis of needs. So what is your opinion? Should this information be obtained from the people or on the basis of the data that are in the registers? Do you know any innovative tools of communication with people, not with group of people, but with individuals? And Diana has already answered this question in the chat, but could you please repeat maybe, briefly for those who cannot read our chat?
Thank you very much. I would stress that censuses and statistics from censuses is needed by our data users. All strategies should based what is needed for data users in one country. What kind of data is needed to provide to the international organizations, and so on and so on. It is the most important. Of course, if you don't want to develop your country or develop sciences or you don't care at all what is going on in your society, you can provide statistics based on available data sources, but we can't say that it is publicly acceptable and it is statistics provided according to principles of statistical production. From my point of view, we should take care about census data users, and it is the most important. And of course, if the data users cannot understand why the statistical office is going to use registered data and why they are going to use, for example, big data and so on, new methods, new innovations, and so on. It is once again problem of statistical services. That means that there is nothing, there has not done sufficient for explaining need of statistics and numbers behind of these figures. It is very important to have a communication and open and transparent communication with all stakeholders, with all partners, and to explain what is good census statistics. And if it is not good, the census data users may exchange their habits and they will use another kind of data sources. So it is some kind of competition, how clear, how transparent, and how cooperative you would be to present statistics needed by society.
Дякую, Діано.
Thank you, Diana. The next question, please. Law of Ukraine on all Ukrainian census of population defines 13 parameters for inclusion of census program, among which is ethnicity and language. can these data be obtained through registers, and in what way? Today we already had the answer that such indicators are impossible to compute by means of registers. But perhaps somebody would like to comment in which way can this information be obtained. Dear Oleg, I would like to answer your question. I would like to answer about our national specifics first, our national peculiarities. Indeed, only one law in Ukraine on all Ukrainian census of population allows to gather data on ethnicity or ethnical origin, and other laws, they are directly prohibiting to have that information in registers. That's why for Ukraine, it's the way that our honorable experts expressed today. If you have these data somewhere in registers, then you have to change the normative base. But I want to speak up right now because I have to leave, because at 2 p.m. I have to be at the session of the budget committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. That's why, unfortunately, I have to leave our experts. But before that, I would like to say words of gratitude to all of you for wonderful presentations, for readiness, especially thank you to for your willingness to participate in the task force. And I would like to underline that today's presentations, they inspire us for the work, for that big work that has to be done by Ukraine in order to move in the direction of register-based census. So one more time, thank you all. And I beg your pardon for having to leave you now. I hope that our colleagues will proceed answering the questions. Thank you all one more time, and so sorry for having to leave you. And dear colleagues, I'm very grateful to you. I mean, our dear experts, for such wonderful and comprehensive presentations. Thank you. See you.
Well,
thank you. Goodbye. Dear colleagues, will there be more comments on the sources of answers to difficult questions which cannot be obtained from administrative registers?
Yes, I'd like to just make a comment here. I was very interested to hear Eric saying that the only census characteristic that he couldn't get from registers in the Netherlands was occupation. Maybe he was just referring to the core topics, I don't know, but generally most countries do not record information on ethnicity and language on registers. And there's a good reason why ethnicity is difficult to capture. One of the essential qualities about ethnicity in a census is that it should be, the information should be supplied what they call by free declaration. People should be free to say what their ethnicity is in their own words. So it is very difficult to classify and categorize this in a register, so that a typical census question would have a free response option. You might have tick box responses, but there's always an option, should always be an option for people to write in the ethnicity that they believe that they are. And this is particularly important of people who think they are of mixed ethnicity. This information is traditionally very difficult to capture in a register. Now, I know that, for example, there are registers held in the UK, for example, by the police, for example. Crime registers are reported by the ethnicity of the people involved, but they're based on a very broad national classification and don't allow the person who's been registered to say, "Wait, that's not my register, that's not my ethnic group group's something else." So it is very difficult. So what you have in those circumstances is, as Eric described, you do a survey, a small sample survey, maybe to collect the information which you can't collect in a register. Of course, the problem with a survey is that unless it's a national survey, the problem with a sample survey is that you may not get small area data for those very sensitive topics. It is up to the country to decide what is best for their own circumstances. Thank you.
Дякую. Дякую, Ian.
Thank you, Jan. And by the way, Jan White also has agreed to join our international group of experts. Thank you, Mr. White. And now I'm pleased to say that amid questions, we have words of gratitude. And I would like to give these words of gratitude to our international colleagues and panelists to express this gratitude. And the next question from the Institute of Demography and Social Studies: are the procedures of imputation, data imputation, used when processing results of census data on the basis of administrative registers?
Can you just repeat that question, Oleg?
Yes, sure. The question is, if data imputation procedures are used when processing the results of a registered-based census. Data imputation. Thank you.
Okay, so you impute data that is missing from your statistical database. So for example, in a traditional census, if you have a questionnaire with a question missing, you can either do one of two things. You can either say not stated in your outputs, or you attempt to impute it by well-known imputation means. And I'm not going to sit here and say what those are, because Eric's probably one of the world's greatest expert on imputation. I hesitate to say anything about that. But you impute the missing data. The same thing will happen in a register, in a register, I guess. If you have a register which you're going to use, you think, well, generally it's good enough for my purposes. And you find that there is a characteristic missing or a person missing. You can either get that information from maybe another register, so you build up your statistical register from other data sources, or in the end you find you just don't have any data. Then you impute in the same sort of way. Maybe the techniques are slightly different, because your database from which you're imputing may be different, but you still impute the data. And normally when you report on the quality of your data, you will maybe report on the number of data items that are imputed rather than actually recorded. But in essence, the imputation of data and the techniques for doing so are really no different whether your data's come from a questionnaire or from a statistical database, from a statistical register.
Maybe I can add that we do use some imputation in our census. There are also variables where we weight to the population totals. And that's an essential difference in practice, because, for example, in our case, the occupation variable is taken from the labor force survey, which is a household sample survey. And then we have lots of records, but that's a small fraction of the total, and we weight it to the population totals. But for example, for education now, for the majority of the people, we know their highest level of education attained. But for some people, we don't know the exact score, but we have some indications what scores it could be. And in such specific situations, we impute with a relatively advanced model the missing information so that we get a complete variable, but then we cannot publish at the record level. I mean, you can never publish at the record level because of confidentiality issues, but here there's also a quality issue. If you have imputed, you're not sure if this is the right score. There's always some variance around the true scores then. And that means that you have also some higher thresholds, how detailed you can publish. We also impute when it comes to household composition. We know exactly who is in the population, who lives where, but we do not always know exactly who is in one household and who is in two separate households at the same address. We have lots of registers to use in such circumstances, but in the end, for the last 5% of the population, we make a guess based on surveys how the distribution should look like. So there are some imputations there as well for census purposes, just like for household statistics purposes. But those are specific issues. Most variables we have from registers are complete, and then you don't need imputation. But this is a complementary method that we have always used in our censuses, and we will also do so for the next census, Census 2021.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Eric. I'm very reluctant to say this. We have a very interesting discussion, but we are very much behind the schedule, behind the agenda, and therefore we have to stop. I have the last question. In my opinion, it is interesting and it is important and relevant. If when working with the data of administrative registers, we establish that the data is problematic, that the data is inaccurate or incompatible, so do we have to report about this to the register owners or register operators? So what happens if those discrepancies or mistakes in the data have some legal consequences for the individuals? For example, what if we establish from the administrative data that somebody is getting social benefits, and at the same time this person is not entitled to have these benefits? We already had the answer in the chat, but I would ask our colleagues to repeat the answer for our colleagues who are viewing us on the Facebook. Thank you.
I think because statistical confidentiality, it is impossible to inform owners of administrative data that they have some exact mistake in their records, because we cannot disclose information about persons or statistical units. So it is impossible to point exactly where you have a mistake. But we have a good cooperation with our owners and partners. So we inform them that in some variables are stored in incorrect way. For example, date or some information about sex or other, I mean gender, and other information. So we cooperate on the higher level. that if they, for example, in addresses make some order, it will be correct information, but if they have a mess, so we inform them that they have to standardize some information, but never in detail. So this is the way for cooperation, and we observe that they improve the quality of the data, and finally we achieve better quality data for next turn of survey. And the same before census, we also have a special committee which consists main data providers and from administrative sources, and discuss some matter concerning usage of coding and geocoding of data, and also standardize some dictionaries which they use in their systems to prepare correct data for statistical usage. It is step by step, and they want to cooperate also because finally it is not only for statistical purposes but also for information, government information systems. So I think that is the way. We never inform, answering, we never inform about detailed information concerning unit of statistical observation. Okay.
Regarding Estonian experience, says that of course register data can be used for discovering graph errors and contradictions, and you may give feedback as well, but not at record level. It is absolutely prohibited to give that kind of feedback to register owners. But you can avoid that kind of errors in future checks for data and rules for data transfers, and even establish registers according to your needs. For example, in 2008, it was not possible to use register data for marital status from population register. There were a lot of mistakes, but for now we can say that this bill is a very good one. And why? Because we propose to register owner to use techniques allowing use of different sub-registers and making decisions by them where they can find mistakes and where were missing data, and so on and so on. So that means that if there are mistakes and errors, of course you should give back, but only aggregate level. And of course there are a lot of possibilities to correct this data, but you cannot provide feedback on record level.
I fully agree to that. And I think there's also an extra reason for it, because if you have access to many different registers and you're allowed to use them and to combine them at the micro level, it means that you know a lot about the people and you know more than individual register owners. They could never do the analysis that you are doing. And Therefore, in my country, there's a law that all the register owners should help each other and should share data. And there's a law that the statistical office can get access to all the public organizations' register data if they are needed for publishing official statistics. But at the same time, for confidentiality reasons, we are never allowed to give feedback at individual records. Of course, we see some errors, especially by combining sources. But we do make quality reports telling where we think a variable is a good variable with not many errors and where there's a variable with many errors. Because it's in the interest of the register owner to improve the quality of its own register. Because that's in the end the most efficient way. The better the quality of the individual registers, the better the quality of all the products of all the users made. And I think that's the kind of philosophy we have behind our laws in the country.
Дякую за відповіді.
Thanks a lot for the answers. So, dear colleagues, dear participants, so we have reached the end of our first webinar. I would like to thank all the panelists for your time, for your inspiration, for the energy, for your willingness to share your experience. Thanks to all the audience, all the members of the audience, thanks to the viewers for staying with us almost until the 2 o'clock. We have been together. Thanks to everybody. See you in a week. See you on next Wednesday at 10 o'clock Kyiv time. I wish everybody a good day. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
До побачення.
Goodbye.
Bye.